everyone, in this tutorial I will show you how you can easily and quickly add weathering effects to your model with our smart weathering set of tools. This is meant to be an overview of the workflow, and you will need to know at least some of the basics of Blender. So it is not a completely beginner tutorial, but it will be a very simple one to follow along. Well, we can start by just showing how this scene is done. We can see that there is a plane. It is only set to have the shadow catcher mode on. The environment has one of our HDRIs set to do the lighting and a plain color to do the background to not distract our workflow. And the other thing important to highlight is that you will need to set the rendering guide to cycles, because otherwise you will not see the smart weathering effects. So now we can start adding our model. In this case I will use one of the models that polycount has. I use the fire hydrant, which is a very nice model. All of them are free to download. You can download them from their webpage, and if you use them, consider donating to them for their work. Once I place the model in the scene, the first thing I will do is to move it to the 0 coordinates of the 3D space. I can check how it looks. I will use the one that is more subtle. So what I will do is to download the 2K maps for their textures, and I can go back to this mode and make them editable so I can start adding those weathering effects. To do so, I will use the Ctrl+A shortcut, make instances real, and I will delete this one, and I have this other version now ready to add weathering effects on it. One of the key concepts to add correctly smart weathering on an object is to ensure that some of their properties are correctly set. I will not make a detailed explanation here, but I can see that in this case the rotation values of this object, the scale ones and the dimensions seems to be correct. If you need to know more, I will give a link to a more detailed video about this, but for now this will be enough. So now I can see that this model has a single material called fire hydrant, which is a PBR setup with albedo, metallic, roughness and normal on it. And what I can do right now is to just start adding smart weathering on it. To do so, I will press N on the shader editor, and under the Thinkify tab I will find the smart weathering options. To start adding weathering, you will need to first add the smart weathering node, and these two buttons would do that work for you easily. So you will need to just press one of them. In this case I will use the active one because there is only a single material, and what it basically does is to connect between the base shader and material output a smart weathering node. This will not only add the smart weathering node, but also will make the node section appear, as now the material has a smart weathering node on it. And this section is one of the new things that we introduced in the 3.0 version, which basically organizes all of these sliders that this node has in a more convenient way, with some utilities like these buttons that we are going to see right now, how they work. The important thing to know is that if you change something in this custom UI or in this node, it will be synced. So I can add the worn effect by enabling the toggle in this custom panel, or I can move it in this node. And if we go back to our full 3D view, we can see that we can enable and disable, or by just moving this slider, which will act as a toggle. So I will try to move the interface a little bit like this, and we can start playing with the weathering effects. In this case I will use the worn one, and you can see that immediately a weathering effect is applied on it, and we can see in these sections which ones are applied right now. For example, bubbles and top corrosions are one of the applied ones. I will start playing a little bit with the top corrosion one, and we can see how it changes the output. One thing that you may notice when you start using the worn effect is that there is a blue border, which is something that we call the fake border, and this is because we need to fake that this paint is being peeled. This color can be changed in the general section of this effect, and in this case I can use a single color, plain one, or even better, as I have a diffuse color or a better one, I can plug it into here and it will give me the base color that the base shader has. And you can see that now if I play with the top corrosion effect, it will be completely seamless. You can see that the workflow is very simple. I will just move the mount value of the bubbles to have more bubbles in this object. I can play with parameters like adding more rust on it, for instance, and also I can play with adding drippings, which is one of the new additions to the new version of Smart Weathering. And you can see that these drippings have an extension which I can control with this other sub slider. In this case I will make that the extension is not too far. And an important thing is that these rust drippings depend on how much rust there is. So the more rust I add, the more intense the drippings will be. Now another factor that I will add is some more noticeable effect on the edges, and in this case I will use the mask to show me how this effect is doing. I will adjust the distance and I can see that it will be changing the worn effect on the edges. If I want to concentrate on that effect, I can toggle the other sub effects off and I can start playing with it. For instance, I can change the spread variation seed and the spread variation scale to make it smaller. And one thing I notice is that it looks a little low poly in here, so I will select the model and add a subdivision surface modifier on it, another one on here, and I will do that process with all of these elements. And I can see that now the worn effect looks a little better. I will change the spread variation amount so I can have more of these effects happening on the edges, and that would be it. I can close this section and I can toggle this on again and click on this button which will show the final version. I can easily toggle now with this eye to turn it on and turn it off to see how it changed my base setup. And I can keep it off so I can add another effect and concentrate on the creation of it. You can see that once I click on the eye icon of the dirt section, the default values will create a dirt effect, and I can see that the default values are pretty good for this case. Even though they are good, I would like to play with this button, which is a randomizer of this effect, so I can have another starting point. So I will click it and I can see how I can get different dirt outputs as this gets randomized. I can increase a little bit the density of the dirt in the cavities, increase the distance, and in case that it doesn't take too much effect, I will start playing with the multiplier, which is okay, but I want to add a little variation on it and make the spread of it a little more pronounced. I will just collapse these sections, check the mask to see how it is looking, and we can get back to this one. We can do the same with the other effects, like splashes. We can randomize them. I can add dust, which again, the default values are very good, but I can play with this randomizer. And let's say that I want that the finished piece has dust, dirt, and worm on it. So you can see that I can stack all of these effects by just enabling them, and we can see how the final piece would be. One thing I noticed is that when I turn this off, I can see that the base shader has a normal map that adds some details to the base shader, and when I turn this on, I will turn off the dust. These details are not there because it is overridden by the reveal shader. And this is okay if you are doing a render that is very far away, and you will probably never notice that. But if you want to still keep it, we have the option to add this information in this section, and you will need to only plug the normal map of your base shader into this slot that we call base bump input. You will need to plug it in, and nothing happens because it is still not activated. This is a slot that you can use it in some effects and not in others, so we need to enable it using it in the worm effect. And I will just move this slider here, and we can see that the reveal shader now has these details. Keep in mind that this kind of additions makes the render go slower because it has to make more calculations and so on. So if you really don't need it, don't add it. And I will play a little bit more with these parameters. I will retouch the top corrosion. I will add a little more of rust. You can see that this normal map information is also transferred to the rust reveal shader. And check a little bit more here the bubbles. I will make them a little smaller, just a touch, and add more extension to it, something like that. That will be okay. Okay, great. Another good tip is that if you're going to make a render that is not very close to the object, again, we recommend disabling this option. And another parameter that we'd recommend using when you want to get performance is the optimize one. It is available in some of the effects, and the worm one has it. And the moment I turn it on, you can see that something happened in the shader. And pay attention to the samples. If I turn it off, you can see that this shader is heavier to compute, and when I turn it on, it gets much faster. So if you are going to make a render and this object is not in the foreground, you can enable this option, and this is also available in the dirt, and this will help a lot into getting more performance, and the visual impact is minimal. I will turn that off, and to show that all these settings can now be transferred to another object, what I can do is to add another object, and let's find this variable. I'll place it there, 0 coordinates, move it a little bit, and make instances real. I will remove this. And now what I can do is to just copy this, and I will use this option just to show something that could happen. And I can see that this is also a simple PBR setup, and I paste it into the active material, and you can see how you can easily transfer all the settings that you have done into another material. Notice that the fake border has the color of the previous material, and this is just a matter of adjusting a few values, in this case this one, and the only thing I would need to do is to plug this information or change the color. And I can also do the opposite. Let's say that I want to make it have more corrosion on top and more bubbles again. What I can do is to go back, copy this. I will not enable this option and paste it here. And now I transfer the effects from the barrel to the fire hydrant. Just a few more things to show is that you can at any point remove this shader setup by simply clicking here in remove, and this will get your previous PBR setup. So that's why we call it a non-destructive workflow. And I will get back again to show something more. This smart weathering setup will give an output according to the object orientation and scale and so on. So if I rotate this like so, you can see that the top corrosion effect is now applied on another part of the barrel. And one thing you may notice is that sometimes you may find these kind of artifacts, and this is because the object has been rotated or it has a wrong scale. But in this case you can solve it, and which will be a common workflow, by adding a texture coordinate and using a reference object. Here, there, and I will pick this object, plug the object output into the custom texture coordinate, and if I turn it on, you can see that the texturing is now fixed. So if I rotate this, you can see now that there are no artifacts and the procedural output adjusts accordingly. Okay, so one thing to add is that if you have this kind of setup where you're using a custom texture coordinate, you can copy this and apply it to the other object, and now it will not only apply the different parameters of the smart weathering node group, but also it will copy the texture coordinate that you are using for your other object, which will come handy if you have many objects. And the last tip is that we recommend using these two buttons, which are show and hide, and this is especially useful when you have many objects that has smart weathering on it, and this can make your scene very heavy to compute. So if you want to get a performance boost while you are texturing, we recommend using the hide button, so it will turn it off from all the materials that has smart weathering, and use this one to enable the smart weathering only on the object that you're working on. And once you finish the texturing work, you can simply go back and click on show, and it will turn it on all the objects. So that would be it. You can see that as a sum up, we added smart weathering. It was a very easy task to do. You just had to use these buttons here, play a little bit with the parameters. It was just a matter of taste. We saw that we can easily copy and paste it into another object, that the output will be created according to the orientation of the object, that you may need to use a custom texture coordinate node, but that will be no problem because you can easily copy this and paste it into other objects, and these other options like show and hide will make your workflow much more efficient. We hope you enjoyed this overview of our smart weathering set of tools, and see you in the next video. Saludos!